And even these ones you can click on, of course, too, for more information when you're reading my stuff. And then the bottom will always be the article itself, the full one. Congress quietly moves to integrate US and Israeli militaries. Isn't that nice? Pretty good. Section 224 would be a different beast entirely. It would fuse the US and Israeli defense sectors in multiple areas vital to battlefields of the future, like autonomous systems and cyber. It would bring extraordinary Israeli influence to the US beyond what is already through the Israeli lobby. We know that that's just a mechanism to essentially give cover, as we know, and its robust network of social media influencers. That's a real thing. It would give the Israeli government the opportunity to greatly expand one of the most powerful levers of influence in US politics, jobs in the US. I mean, it is a reality, but it's integrating it even further. By expanding or starting new co production facilities like it already has in Mississippi and Arkansas, the Israeli government could boast of providing jobs on U.S. soil, thereby securing allies among members of Congress who represent the districts where those jobs lie. So basically, they're making it easier for Israeli companies to build factories in the United States and then make use of U.S. infrastructure in order to get those to Israel. The enormous gulf between what most Americans want and what the president is doing when it comes to Israel and what Congress is proposing here should not be ignored. Just 30% of respondents to a New York Times Siena poll from mid May believe Trump made the right decision to go to war with Iran. 30% is abysmal, with 60% saying it was wrong. Sorry, 64% saying it was wrong. That's Americans. An Institute for Global Affairs poll released earlier this week dove even deeper into the American psyche when it comes to arming Israel, finding that just 16% say that the United States should keep supplying Israel with weapons without new restrictions. 38% want to stop supplying weapons entirely. Another 24% want weapons conditioned on how they're used. But that shows you like how still low the consciousness of Americans are, right? Like it is that it's great that that's only 16% say that they should keep arming Israel without restrictions, but only 38% say to stop supplying weapons entirely to Israel. Come on. Fucking Americans. I mean, Canadians would be the same way, to be fair, but Westerners, I guess I should say. You know, it's the same type of it's the same type of outlook as like the settler colony of Israel itself. This is what people try and tell you, that people in the US and Canada have essentially the same genocidal outlook as Israel. They just frame it differently in a sneakier, like more insidious way, in a sense. Right? They're just like less openly honest about it in a sense. But yet they're like, oh, well, we shouldn't stop sending them weapons entirely. You know? I gotta imagine this is happening now because Iran has made it impossible for Israel to have a domestic weapons manufacturing industry. Absolutely, that's why it's happening. 100%. I mean, absolutely. Any poll is like that. Any data set is like that. Right, King? That is a great thing to point out. But I do think that I do think that that is quite an accurate representation of how many overall would be willing to, especially people with like any kind of political fucking influence right now in academia or whatever else, right? Like academia is so cooked in the US. Yeah, Canada and the US are absolutely colonialist. Yes, they have ongoing genocides in their own country. Native people in Canada are being forcibly sterilized. Their cultures and languages are still being erased and not protected. That's that I would, yeah. UN agreed that was a genocide, even, you know? So, yeah, this is from Responsible Statecraft, which is, a more libertarian leaning thing, which is why some of this, of course, which is why I gave you a bit of a spin on some of it, but we look everywhere. Here you go. Here you go. Guatemala. Another country stepping up. Guatemala is now agreeing to allow U.S. airstrikes in its country. Isn't that nice? Isn't it nice when your own country agrees to let the U.S. bomb it to get fucking drug cartels or whatever the fuck? Guatemala has agreed to carry out joint strikes with the U.S. military on territory to target drug trafficking groups. New York Times reported on Thursday. Yeah, I heard they denied the report. Do you have a source for that? As the Trump administration continues escalating its military interventions across Latin America. Democracy Now! Said it today. In their headlines? I would be curious to see that. Is that in their headline report? Are we gonna have to watch Amy today? Guatemala denies reports. This is from today. Okay, let's see what this says. Guatemala's government denies reports that it agreed to allow the Trump administration to carry out strikes against accused drug traffickers inside the Central American country. Not to say that this is going to stop them from doing it, sadly. Guatemalan President Bernardo Arevalo was responding to a New York Times report that was published Thursday. The report cited a letter by the Guatemalan government addressed to U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and a reported phone call between Arevalo and Hegseth last week. Arevalo said that Guatemala is seeking joint collaboration with Washington, D.C. in drug enforcement operations, but stressed his government would not approve U.S. military attacks on the ground. They're going to do it anyway, then. That's what we're seeing. The rest of this actually is, they did hold the phone call. But look at this. This is the part I do want you to, I want to read the last paragraph of this because I think that makes this relevant, right? Guatemala has become the second country in the region to allow U.S. military to take part on its war on drugs, after Ecuador, where U.S. military personnel are advising and assisting Ecuadorian troops. The Times previously reported that one of the first operations involved bombing what the U.S. and Ecuador claimed was a drug camp, but later turned out to be a dairy farm. Yeah, this looks like some type of training scenario going on here, I'd say, Zoot. Yes, the US is lying. Now, okay, so whether they're going to actually allow strikes or not, we'll see. Yeah, the Ecuador strikes apparently were carried out against a supposed drug camp. It was reported in US media. And then it turns out that they didn't strike any kind of drug camp. It was just this dairy farm. Yeah, they're surrounding Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, and we read yesterday they have naval assets now in the area that are poised to attack Cuba as well. Here's a piece from Press TV for y'all. Hezbollah's hell of deadly drones drives Israeli desperation to bomb Beirut. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, a member of the ruling coalition, said on Monday, quote, "For every explosive drone, 10 buildings in Beirut should fall." So-called security minister Itamar Ben-Gvir urged the Zionist regime to, quote, "cut the electricity, turn off the switch, and make it clear to them that if Hezbollah drone strikes continue, you will suffer the consequences." The Israeli military has admitted to the killing of 22 soldiers since early March. Press X in chat if you doubt that 20 if you think that that's accurate or not. 22. Press X to doubt. I'm sure I've seen more than 22 fucking soldiers in footage myself, for God's sakes. The Israeli military has admitted to the killing of 22 soldiers since early March. The commander of the 401 Armored Brigade is seriously injured by Hezbollah fighters in South Lebanon on April 20th. In response to Hezbollah's success, Israel has unleashed a massive destruction across southern Lebanon. On Tuesday alone, Israeli warplanes launched approximately 150 strikes in the southern city of Tyre and Nabateh, and in the Bekaa Valley. At least 31 people were killed and 40 wounded that day, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. The expansion is aimed at pushing back against Hezbollah's fiber optic FPV drones, which have inflicted heavy losses on Israeli troops. Nets and other protective measures have failed to thwart the drone attacks. The Israeli army has failed to achieve its stated goals of occupying Lebanese territory up to the Litani River, and has been unable to fully capture the strategic city of Ben Jabal, which remains inhabited by resistance fighters despite a scorched earth policy. Press TV. Yeah, good point, Laney. We watched the compilation yesterday. There was like a good 100 right there. The beautiful thing about the Larry news is sometimes you even get videos from Larry. Isn't that cool? Larry news, everybody. Cuba under growing pressure. This is from CGTN here. We got a couple pieces. The first one here.
Heard in our report there.
This is Carlos Alzugare, who's a former Cuban ambassador to Brussels.
Are struggling under the weight of this oil blockade that's been imposed by the United States. That's, of course, in addition to the economic blockade that's been in place for several decades. And the United States is also now imposing secondary sanctions on those countries that might be able to supply Cuba with
secondary sanctions.
Energy. What is your assessment of conditions in the country right now?
Conditions are very tough, very difficult. However, the country is not collapsing. As there has been this saying that the country is collapsing, we're trying to survive, and we are surviving with a lot of difficulties. And of course, as you pointed out,
Cuba.
It has been almost 7 decades of American economic war against Cuba, but the pressure now has increased enormously. Remember, we are still in the list of states that sponsor terrorism, a completely unjustified action by the United States. President Trump declared an oil embargo on Cuba in January, and then the secondary sanctions that recently were put in place. Frankly, what they are doing is trying to choke the Cuban economy, try to compel the Cuban government to surrender.
Absolutely. Yes.
To whatever.
And Cuba is one of the most threatening revolutions too, being right off the coast of fucking the United States, right?
Wants to do with Cuba, and this is unacceptable. This is criminal, and this is unacceptable for most Cubans. But it means we have to survive. It means we have to make do with what we have. It's very difficult right now. We are producing about 40% of the oil that is being used in our thermoelectric plants. And then with the help of China, we are increasing our solar energy panels to a level that I think right now probably it's around 30% of what we need. I'm not sure because the program of putting in place solar panels with the aid of China is so fast, it's moving so fast that it changes from one week to the other.
Let's
A
go.
couple of weeks ago, it was 20%, probably now it's 30.
Right. China is also bringing humanitarian assistance to Cuba.
China's not doing enough, folks. Fucking just absolutely reeling right now.
It's donating 60,000 tons of rice.
Let's think. Who has stepped up to help Cuba the
there.
most during this
There's also a cargo
time?
ship from Mexico.
Let's think about
and,
that.
Uruguay that
China?
also recently docked in Havana
Russia.
with food, powdered milk, and other supplies as well. I mean, how critical are these donations at a time when the country is coming under so much pressure?
They're very critical, especially for the lower level of the population that cannot pay for the high prices that the small and medium-sized enterprises are charging. The small and medium-sized enterprises are importing incredibly from the United States, but also from Mexico and from Canada and from European countries. But it is insufficient, of course. It's difficult for many people to survive, but they are surviving, and the will to resist is there.
The director of the United States spy agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, a man called John Ratcliffe, he traveled to Cuba this month to personally deliver a message from President Trump. This is what the message was. I'll read it to you. I'll quote it. The United States is prepared to seriously engage on economic and security issues, but only if Cuba makes fundamental changes. So this is the United States calling on Cuba to change its internal policies. As you pointed out, the goal of the United States is to choke Cuba economically and want the Cuban government to surrender unconditionally to the Americans. Question is, how does Cuba resist this kind of pressure?
Well, it's basically, practically there is no option. What the United States is telling to the Cuban government is you have to surrender unconditionally. Now, which country would do that, would surrender unconditionally when it has not done anything wrong or attacked anyone or engaged in a war with the United States? These are behaviors that are totally unacceptable from the point of view of the United Nations Charter, from the point of view of international law. So it's only natural that the Cuban government says, no, I won't go there.
Well, the Trump administration has also indicted the former leader of Cuba, Raul Castro. They've charged him with murder, with conspiracy, and that goes back to the shooting down of airplanes that were carrying anti-Cuba activists over Cuba at that time. 4 people were killed.
Anti-Cuba activists. That's much more accurate than the U.S. describes them.
Public say that.
You know how U.S. media was describing these flights? Humanitarian aid flights or some shit.
In fact, there were warnings at that time from the United States State Department to the Federal Aviation Administration that these flights need to be stopped because they were violating Cuban space. What can you tell us about this case and why now?
Well, of course, they're searching desperately for an excuse to say we are ready to invade you. So, since January 3rd, when they abducted President Maduro from Caracas, they are trying to think a way of they can apply that to Cuba. Of course, Cuba is not Venezuela. The advantages that the United States had in Venezuela, surprise factor, penetration of the Venezuelan government and the Venezuelan tactical defenses, they don't exist in Cuba. So it's going to be something very difficult. And on the other hand, Raul Castro was at the time Minister of Defense. He had the responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, that's to be fair, that's their propaganda for all of the socialist countries, essentially,
to protect Cuban airspace. These people, they had violated the Cuban airspace several times, even that same day, just a few minutes before being down. Now, the Cuban government had been telling the American government for more than a year, listen, these flights must stop. At some point in time, there's going to be a tragedy. And as a matter of fact, that's what happened.
There was a national rally held recently to protest that indictment against Raul Castro. His daughter, Mariela Castro, spoke to CGTN. This is what she had to say. Let's listen.
He's very well, taking it easy as an old guerrilla fighter. He follows the news and smiles. He also knows what he has to do, and he has always said this: nobody can ever get me alive. I will die in the fight.
That's Mariela Castro, the daughter of Raul Castro. Listening to her there, listening to her comments, when she says, Raul Castro says, nobody will take me, I will die in the fight. What does that tell us about the revolutionary spirit in Cuba and the fact that it has not been dimmed in any way, even by 70 years of an economic blockade?
Obviously, that's Raul Castro. What Mariela said, I know the family, and I know Raul Castro, and I know her, and I know her sister, her brother. I know perfectly well that that's the way he thinks. So I am not surprised at all by what Mariela said. And let me add you something. The people who surround him with the purpose of protecting him, which includes his grandson, they're going to fight. They're going to fight to the death. I have no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And the Americans should have no doubt about that. If they want to have in their hands the blood and the corpse of a 95-year-old person accused of a crime he didn't commit and a crime that happened 30 years ago, well, that's going to happen. And by the way, many of us in Cuba think that way. I am now in Paris attending a conference on Latin American studies, but I will be returning next Monday to Havana, and I am ready to fight, even though I am 83. And I know many people who are ready to fight.
Yeah.
Recently, singer Silvio Rodriguez, an icon of Latin American music, said, give me my gun, give me my rifle, my AKM, and I'm ready to fight.
Viva Cuba.
For more than 6 decades, the United States has imposed sanctions on Cuba. In January, U.S. President Trump escalated tensions by threatening tariffs on countries.
Okay, we have another one here as well on the same page that I got for you. CGTN also interviewed our blue-eyed boy, Ben Norton.
Is turning up the pressure on Cuba. This has been going on for decades. But now the Trump administration has turned its attention to Havana, and it's acted. It has indicted the former Cuban president, Raul Castro, charging him with murder and conspiracy charges.
It's
For
Benny.
the downing of a plane that killed 4 people. This plane was carrying anti-Cuba activists. This happened 30 years ago. What do you believe?
He's what happens when you go woke. He's what happens when a gray zone reporter goes woke.
Action. We hear from many analysts here in the United States that the Trump administration offers a very narrow window to anti-Cuban activists to get what they've wanted for the last 6.5 decades, and that is the overthrow of the Cuban government. Is this what is behind this latest action?
Well, it's clear that the U.S. wants regime change. This is, of course, not a new policy. It goes back decades. But the second Trump administration has made this a major priority, especially with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who has really dedicated his entire political career to regime change in Cuba. Rubio is, of course, of Cuban descent. His parents were right-wing anti-communist Cubans who moved to the United States. It was actually before the revolution, but he's made this a key point of his political career. And this latest indictment is
the funniest part is they left under Batista.
This is an incident from 1996 in which there were 2 planes of anti-Cuban activists who were flying from the U.S.
Didn't he leave the gray zone like a dishonest chump? Why the need to stand?
Not to enter Cuban
No, he
airspace,
didn't leave
and they
the gray
ignored
zone
the
like a
warning.
dishonest
Now
chump.
the U.S. is
The
trying to
dishonest
portray
chump
this as
is
some,
Max from the fucking gray
scandalous
zone.
incident. Most people didn't even know about this story until the indictment against Raul Castro. So I think this is clearly an excuse that is being used to try to up the pressure on Cuba. And I'm very concerned about the reports we've seen, not only in the media. There have been reports that the U.S. military is preparing a potential attack on Cuba, but also the governor of Puerto Rico, Jennifer Gonzalez, who's an ally of Donald Trump. She just said in an interview a few days ago that the U.S. is preparing a military attack on Cuba as soon as potentially this upcoming week. Now, this could be part of a psychological campaign.
Yo, thread of solidarity with the 5 gift subs. Thank you so much, comrade. Very much appreciate that. Salute. Appreciate your solidarity, comrade.
Having a, U.S. official from Puerto Rico speaking in Spanish, people.
How are you gonna ask me how so? You're the one who made the accusation about Ben first.
And
Max is the one who owns the gray zone, you realize.
Essentially invaded Venezuela.
He fucking underpays people. He there's all kinds of shit.
Venezuela. So, this of course would be a massive escalation, and it would violate international law. But given all of the things that the U.S. has been doing, the war in Iran, the attack on Venezuela.
But I mean, you're the one who's making the charge here.
Of the Trump administration, and it's very concerning.
Now, Cuba is receiving support from China. China has expressed its support and advised against any U.S. military threat. This is what a spokesperson for the Chinese foreign ministry had to say. Let's listen.
China always advocates respecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries, opposes using or threatening to use force in international relations, and opposes infringing on the sovereignty of other nations or interfering in their internal
Well, here's the thing, meat is murder.
Pretext.
At the end of the day, gray zone doesn't have as good politics as geopolitical economy report. I'm not trying to get down into the investigating the personal lives of Ben Norton versus Max Bluthemel, but I do know that geopolitical economy report 100% has better political line than the gray zone, and that's why I tend to prefer it as a media outlet, as a place to get analysis from. The gray zone, on the other hand, I sometimes use the gray zone, as I did yesterday for that report with Evo, but I do not find that its analysis is good as geopolitical economy report.
And the purposes and principles.
And then I find the peak of geopolitical economy analysis is Radhika Desai. Yeah, I mean that's it for me. Like I'm not looking to do an investigation of Max Bluthemel versus Ben Norton, right? I'm worried about the politics.
The UN Charter. China firmly supports Cuba in safeguarding its sovereignty.
And even then, I watch all kinds of news that.
So Ben, what is the message that China is sending?
I get information from all kinds of sources. I use anti-war frequently, as you all know.
There to countries planning on violating international law.
Yeah, this is a very important message. China is reaffirming international law and the UN Charter, and the very foundation of international law and the UN Charter is respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of countries. And the U.S. violated that in Venezuela, it violated that in Iran, and now it's threatening to do the same to Cuba. So having China, which is, of course, a very large, powerful country, reaffirm that on the international stage is very important. And China's also been acting in several other ways to help
Thank you,
Cuba.
Threads of Solidarity.
One of the big issues we haven't talked about is energy. Because,
especially
even if the U.S. does not directly launch a military attack on Cuba, the U.S. has already been waging a kind of indirect war against Cuba through a naval blockade. The U.S. military has tried to prevent countries from shipping oil to Cuba. Of course, the U.S. has imposed an economic embargo on Cuba for more than 60 years. And every single year at the United Nations General Assembly, almost all countries on Earth vote to demand an end to the U.S. economic embargo.
For decades now.
The second Trump administration has expanded that into an oil blockade. And in Cuba, you have blackouts, you have hospitals that don't have enough electricity, so people are dying because they can't get life-saving treatment. Schools have had to close because they don't have enough electricity. So the U.S. is already suffocating Cuba economically and a military attack would just be another extreme level. So this is also where China comes in. China has become the world.
I mean, yeah, this is a good point. If American exiles were flying unapproved planes against the explicit demands of the U.S., flying them over U.S. territory, dropping leaflets criticizing the U.S. state, how long do you think they would stay airborne? And do you think a single country would condemn the U.S. for doing so? I mean, I think I think a hint to that would be the response to that balloon that they said came from
Leader
China
in green
right?
energy technology, and China has, in the past year, has massively increased its exports of solar panels. China is helping Cuba to install solar panels and create these solar panel farms, so Cuba can have this energy, so it's not reliant on
They
oil
shot that
imports.
balloon down
So
over
this has been a lifesaver for Cuba.
where was it?
But again, if the U.S. military attacks,
North Carolina
I
or
mean, that's just a
South
massive
Carolina?
escalation.
One of the
This is why,
Carolinas.
you see so many people around the world warning that international law is being threatened by the increasing unilateralism and aggressiveness we see in Washington.
Right, and speaking of life-saving actions that
I
China
thought it was
is taking,
Florida.
China is looking
thought it
at
was,
also relieving the humanitarian crisis that's followed
Myrtle
this,
Beach. Where's
blockade
Myrtle
of
Beach?
energy to Cuba. I mean, the blockade has brought to a halt all economic activity, as well as daily activity for Cubans. But China announced a 60,000-ton donation of rice to Cuba,
That's
and
Florida.
that first shipment will be arriving
South
this
Carolina.
week. Do you see that expanding in the weeks ahead?
Well,
Chad is
important.
fucking.
China's provided
Chad's gaslighting me.
assistance. Also,
Is
Mexico
it South
and
Carolina
Colombia
or Florida?
providing
Where is
assistance. They've
fucking
been
Myrtle
very
Beach?
important. Brazil is announcing assistance. The issue is
South Carolina. Okay, that's where it was blown up.
And it
Myrtle
helps
Beach.
people, in Cuba make sure they have food.
I know it was
and
Myrtle
make sure
Beach
they're not
because
going
my
hungry.
buddy got video of it.
The real problem, again, is that this threat of the U.S. attacking Cuba, because it's very.
I thought it was in
important for
Virginia.
Cuba to have electricity and food and energy, all of these things.
There's
But
too many
what's
states.
so
We're going to
frustrating about
reduce the amount of
situation is
states after
it's
socialism.
one country that is threatening a small island nation. Of course, the U.S. has the most powerful military in the world, and no one can really, speaking bluntly, no one can really do anything to stop the U.S. from launching this kind of attack, which is why China's
Call me
message
Jesus,
of
no worries,
respecting
no worries.
international law is so important. Because if we do not have multilateral institutions that can actually uphold,
I just knew that
international
I
law,
just knew my
then all
friend
we
took
have
a
is the law
picture of it.
jungle. If the U.S. military, the U.S. government thinks that it can simply attack any country anywhere in the world and there will be no consequences, then it will do so. So this is why I think China's message of emphasizing the role of the United Nations and the UN Charter is so important.
Make the entire Northeast one state. Include Cuba. Sinchel gets it. Sinchel knows what I'm talking about here. No thanks. All right, the socialist headline section of the newspaper. I invite you all to read this article today. Wait, I didn't link it properly. Okay, well, I'll link it. Fuck, I screw up the news once every day. But when it goes up on YouTube, the link will be fixed. Or when I post it in my chat, it'll be fixed, okay? But Raul Santiago, as Santiago is to Cuba, he has always instilled confidence in us, reminding us that unity is our greatest strength. He is very kind, enjoys sharing anecdotes and stories, and imparting knowledge to present and future generations with modesty, selflessness, and altruism, he said. In his most recent speech, on the occasion of the 65th anniversary of the triumph of the revolution, he affirmed that, from heroic Santiago to Cuba, we reaffirmed that we remain steadfast and ready to charge with machetes alongside the people, and as one more combatant. I was there, and the unanimous response was, "Long live Raul." And I'll get that link and link that to you. That's from Grandma News. Look at that picture of Raul there. I wonder if my chat would be so based as to type "Long live Raul." It's a lovely picture of him there. You can also type exclamation mark Raul into my chat, and you'll get my favorite Raul Castro quote. Right, if someone is interested in what the Cubans' opinion is on certain questions, he should ask the Koreans. And if someone asks what Korea's standpoint is on certain cases, he can safely ask the Cubans about that. Our views are completely identical in everything. That's what he said after his trip to DPRK. After he returned, that was the speech he gave. A true comrade. I've got a piece here from Lao for you, from KPL, Lao News Agency. Officials said international conflicts and economic uncertainty have affected commodity prices and transportation costs in Laos. Despite those pressures, the government said political stability remains intact. The meeting highlighted ongoing efforts to rescue 7 people trapped inside a cave in Sambon province. Authorities also reported intensified crackdowns on illegal mining operations under the Prime Minister's Order Number 46. Officials said vehicles, machinery, and equipment were seized, and suspects detained in several provinces, including Luang Prabang, Chekspore, Vientiane, and Savakhet. And this is what we call good police actions. The government also announced progress in dismantling online scam networks in multiple provinces and Vientiane capital, leading to the arrest of Lao and foreign suspects. Among priorities for June 2026, officials pledged to continue crackdowns on scams, drugs, and human trafficking, strengthen border security, improve disaster preparedness, and support rescue efforts in Chiasombom. This meeting also discussed education reform, proposed amendments to the budget and treasury laws, and measures to address a fish die-off in Champasak province. Solidarity with Lao. Some anarchists might call those measures authoritarian. In which case I quote them Engels. I cannot imagine a more authoritarian thing than a revolution. A piece from Vietnam for you. Vietnam News Agency. The coastal area of Van Trong, Dong Son communes, Quang Binh province, also known for its seaweed ecosystem, acting as a green lung of the ocean, and providing protective benefits for the coastal ecosystem. Recently, the local government has established a community group of 100 members to protect aquatic resources, seaweed, and develop community tourism. All members participate on a voluntary basis and will take on the task of patrolling and supervising the assigned area, protecting seaweed resources and coastal ecosystems. Leftists do tend to be authoritarian conservative. I don't think we're conservative, though. I think we're the opposite of conservative. I think, well, if we're talking Marxist-Leninists seek to overcome all the backwards ideas, right? We conserve an idea. What idea is that we conserve? Global experts acclaim China's poverty reduction. The 2026 Global Poverty Reduction and Development Forum closed in Beijing with wide international acclaim for China's poverty reduction governance and a landmark new global initiative to accelerate shared development. Conserve the idea that humans should not be exploited. Yeah, if that's what you mean by that, then I agree. Chinese Premier Liu Zhengzhao stressed the urgent need for joint global action to advance poverty reduction. He stated that China will support the GPPAD in policy dialogue, technical demonstration, and talent training, and launch a series of small yet smart projects to help developing countries strengthen their anti-poverty capacity. Top global experts at the forum agreed that China's achievements in eradicating absolute poverty and promoting rural revitalization provide highly valuable experiences for the world. Sabina Al-Carrier of Oxford University highlighted China's targeted poverty alleviation model, noting its strong political commitment, sustained investment, hierarchical management, and household-specific interventions as key pillars of global learning. Heidi Kahn, 2023 World Food Prize winner, linked agriculture, food security, and peace. She commented China's people-centered approach and its focus on empowering women in rural communities, viewing it as path to inclusive prosperity and development. It's not all of us, obviously, but like some of us tend to want to maintain the meaning of symbols. This isn't a bad thing, it's just a thing that happens. The meaning of symbols? CGTN. And remember, you can always click on my links to see the full thing. That's not what I thought you meant by conserve, but okay. I got two sources from China for you today because check this one out, chat. Look at this one. A 15-cent meal that warms the night. Late at night, outside a small takeaway shop, warm meals are waiting for just 15 cents. Check this out. Look at this. 15-cent meals in China. Here's people waiting for it. I mean, that's it. That's the 15-cent meal right there. This box. Veggies, meat, noodles, rice. China's winning. China is winning, Chad. A 15-cent meal. And finally, one from DPRK for you all. New history of Golden Mountains. Are there any northern style dishes I can get at a South Korea restaurant? I mean, kimchi is a restaurant that you see on both sides. But that's a good question. Julia would be one to ask about that. Or if you ask in the Juche Gang channel in the Discord, I bet either Julia or Roy would be able to answer that for you, come to think of it. Yeah, very similar culture. Although, like, DPRK Gitwall does have some unique dishes like Pyongyang cold noodles. Alright, this is from Pyongyang. This is Rodong Sinmun. A new history of Golden Mountains. In the 10 odd years of forest restoration, our people not only learned to plant trees and tend them, but also nurtured the spirit of loving the country and the future, and acquired the faith that they have peerlessly great man, the present and the future of the beautiful country are guaranteed. Forests are a valuable resource of the country, the wealth to be handed down to posterity, and an important means of protecting the land. Full of pity that the forest resources shrank in bulk during their arduous march, the respected comrade General Secretary Kim Jong-un inspected the central tree nursery. under the Ministry of Land and Environment Protection in November 2014 and declared a war with nature, unprecedented in history. Isn't that interesting? While the US was fighting a war on drugs and a war on terror, DPRK was fighting a war with nature by planting diverse trees. So he declared a war on nature unprecedented in history, stressing that there was no space to step back, leaving bare mountains as they were. Once he assigned provinces, cities, and counties the task to include the creation of forests for raw materials of paper in the Forest Restoration Plan. Another year, he stressed the need to combine different species of trees as suited to the characteristics of relevant regions, and taught that mountains can be greened, and a lot of chestnuts can be harvested if chestnut trees are planted on hills. In May 2019, the respected Comrade General Secretary told the senior officials of the party Central Committee that it is good to create mixed forests, like in mountains around around Lake Sapung, and that the forest management sector should produce tree saplings of good species and create mixed forests in all the mountains. Very important. Mixed trees, a diverse species of trees, is incredibly important. One day, several years ago, when the campaign for implementing a second stage task of forest restoration was going on, the respected Comrade General Secretary met with officials and gave precious instructions as to turning all the mountains in the country into golden and treasured ones. That day, he taught it necessary to uphold the slogan, "Let us turn all the mountains into useful golden ones," in order to turn the bare mountains into ones of practical utility, not just green ones. Later on, respected Comrade General Secretary taught to create mixed forests in a rational way, in detailed consideration of the symbiosis relation of trees, meteorological and climate conditions of relevant regions, soil conditions, and purpose of forest creation. Our people who have covered the path of devotion towards a more beautiful future of the country, which will be thickly wooded, sharing the same patriotic will with the great party Central Committee, are making confident strides towards attaining the fighting goal of a new stage full of extraordinary preparedness. Rodong Simum. Communism will win, comrades.